my name is Heather Alexis. I'm the director and editor of No Strings Attached, and this is my friend Val, who is also in the film. I'm going to be answering questions specifically based on our scenes within the film. No Strings Attached is a film that really centers around different trials. Each of the trials has a specific color, a specific location, and a specific sound for each of the scenes, and so I'm going to be kind of answering your questions about the specific moments. I guess we'll go in order, because that would make the most sense. Questions about the cliff, because we start on the cliff. How did you make Bal still? We didn't. We got very lucky when the wind would stop that we got enough seconds of still to get his reaction shots. It very much involved Alyssa and I hanging off the cliff, holding onto the balloon, and trying desperately to keep it still with a fishing rod, clear string, and tape. So it was a time. What was it like filming on a cliff, and did this change the storyboard? Very much so, because we can't film on a cliff because that's not safe. So we had to find a location that looked enough like a cliff, but also was a safe spot to film. And this definitely changed how we shot, because originally I wanted the opening sequence to be a oneer, where we start on the eyes and we zoom all the way out to reveal our main character on the ledge. And that was obviously not going to happen. And so we definitely had to change how we played around with that, get different coverage. Instead of doing a one shot, really work on the cuts. And that changed how we filmed it. How did you deal with the subject matter, and how long did it take to write that scene? Oof. It didn't take too long to write that scene, just because it's coming from a very real place. I had a while to workshop that opening, because I had been trying to make this film for 3+ years. This was supposed to be my undergrad thesis, and that got canceled. And so there were multiple iterations of this script, where originally it was gonna just take place in an apartment, and then it got moved to a pier, and then it got moved to the cliff, and then eventually it kind of turned into what it is today. There was a point in time where I almost filmed the entire film, me acting in it, with a very, very condensed just monologue on a beach, where we did end up shooting this opening sequence with the current monologue that's in there. That footage will not be released to the public, because Sylvie did such a wonderful job, and a better job than I could have ever done. And it definitely needed to come from an outside source and someone who is a trained actor, and so I'm really glad that we landed on this. And I think that Sylvie really added so much to the subtext of that scene, and we handled the subject matter with care in that sense. When rehearsing the scene, we kind of spoke about what it was representing and how we could have the monologue feel authentic. Then we enter the apartment. How did you fit all of the gear and crew in the apartment space? Crew's friend allowed us to shoot in her apartment, which we are very, very thankful for. I appreciate you. It was a tight squeeze. We had a room full of balloons, and people having to do that final scene where it's a oneer from the door to the couch was definitely an experience of everybody hiding as best they could. Filling the entire living room with all of the balloons was also a complete time, because we had to move everything out, and that was our last shot of the day, which I don't recommend doing. Do the important shot early. But we made it work, and definitely a learning experience. Were any of the scenes in the apartment ad-libbed or improvised? That's a great question. I don't think so. It was just a lot of interacting with a balloon, and so Sylvie kind of put her own twist on that when we were doing the scenes, because a lot of the scenes didn't have dialogue. It was just a lot of physical acting, and she decided to kind of take the reins on that, which was cool to see her interact with Bal through what we were shooting as a montage, a passage of time, and see her annoyance grow as more and more Bals appeared. How did you film the shot where she was sitting on the sofa and all the balloons were there? We had it on a stabilizer, a gimbal, and we had to have our camera person and sound person walk together as Sylvie was acting and walking through the apartment. So everybody kind of had to hide as we did this like one shot, which we had to do quite a few times to try and get that right, and I'm happy with how it turned out. How did you get the bed shot with all the different balloons and position it? How many takes did it take? And how did you choose the layout? That one was one take. That one was really easy to set up, because we got to design exactly what it was going to look like. I think that's one of my favorite shots as well. I think it's one of the most beautiful shots. So from the apartment, we end up in the empty field. In the empty field, we have the sign that says metanoia. So the number one question is, what does metanoia mean? So in psychology, metanoia is referring to a significant shift in a person after a breakdown and subsequent healing. And so the film is essentially about going through this breakdown with our main character, really confronting head on the different aspects of her life that are affecting her and kind of trying to work with her towards a point of healing. And so that's what metanoia means, and that's why it's so prominent on that sign in the empty field, because it is representing the trial that she is about to go through in order to complete metanoia. That's the point of the empty field scene. It's representing this transitionary force before she enters into Bal's world and her kind of avoidance of the issues that she needs to deal with. And so the empty field, specifically when we come back to it later, is very representative of the two sides, her black and white thinking and then the colorful side. And that's why we have that split color scene where she can't seem to get past this black and white thinking, and Bal is trying to show her that there's so much more. And so that was a really important scene for me specifically to incorporate and for me to keep in the film. And that was also a very important scene production design wise and post wise, because we really needed to make sure that that sign was prominent. It represented all of the different trials with the fonts and the colors of the sign, and that also it was color graded in a way where we had those two worlds at the same time. There's a moment where Faith and her thinking overtakes Bal trying to help, and the color washes out of the scene. That was really cool because I got to work with Atlas on that animation of basically the color being blown out of the scene and Bal turning into having only gray lines around him instead of his typical yellow ones. From the empty field, we do end up in the black and white abyss. The black and white abyss comes back a few times. The first time that we enter the black and white abyss, we're dealing with my representation of an anxiety and panic attack. That was a very important scene to deal with and to work with our crew on, specifically working with our actors, making sure that she felt safe, having a closed set for only necessary people to be there, and trying to represent that as authentically as possible. I really heavily relied on our sound design and our composer for that scene to really build on the feelings that our main character was going through. We also had a really cool idea to work with a split diopter filter, which means that when we were shooting with the camera, we had a lens filter that creates this line effect and blurs the vision and really gives this eerie effect of the black balloon, the abyss balloon, and I think it worked really well for driving home the anxiety of that scene and the anxiety that that balloon causes. And that's why at the end, the black and white abyss comes back. Suddenly the balloon is still while the animation is moving all over the place. And it's important to kind of represent the two sides of anxiety there and how it can be calm and still present, but also how it can be very overpowering. And that's kind of why we have it at the beginning and at the end in the two different states. This is specific to the end of the scene where how did we get the balloon to match cut? And that's kind of a secret because it's a bit of a spoiler, but it does involve a hidden object and lots of framing and measurement in order to get the exact hand movement and change at the end. So that I'm very excited to be able to share with everyone because that took a lot of planning on set and then planning in post. From the black and white abyss, we end up back in the empty field and then back into a colorful abyss. And the colorful abyss is very representative of all of her thoughts. The colorful abyss is supposed to represent train of thought and kind of everything that's going on in her head. And that's why there are so many balloons all over the place and we have all of the different colors, and the colors of the scene are changing as well in the lights. And it's supposed to just represent that her mind is never quiet. And when she's trying to confront all of this and the colorful abyss changes into essentially a museum of each of the different trials, that's when we switch the lights out, we switch the design, and we end up in a very clear white space that feels like a museum of the specific traumas that she needs to deal with. And so that was a cool scene to film because I got to work with our lighting design designer who was able to create this hospital-esque lighting of just an all-white room and then transition it into the colors changing based on her confronting each of the trials. Being able to do that was really fun in creating the VFX of her leaving and going into the next scene. So the next scene was the beach scene. How did we film on the beach without people? Well, we filmed in the fall when no one was at the beach, so it was quite cold when we were filming, hence the coat. How did we get the stroller to move on its own? This is kind of a fun little PD thing. I attached it to a string and I pulled it. My favorite prop in the beach scene is 100% the baby balloon in the stroller with the bonnet. That was just like the cutest thing to do. Alyssa and I took so long trying to prep that balloon so late at night the day before we shot, and I think it looks great and wonderful, and it's just funny that we were able to create a baby balloon when it's just an object. So we hope you like it. How was the animation done with the fighting balloons? That was really interesting because I got to work with Atlas on creating the different fighting elements. We got to talk about what fighting would look like between these two characters, between these two balloons, and we got to talk about whether or not one had a sharper tone, and so there would be sharper animations for the fighting, or whether one was softer or a little quieter, and what that would look like if that would be more squiggly. And so we were able to really piece together what the animation was supposed to look like based on the feelings of the scene. From the beach, we head into the club scene, which we actually rented a club to shoot at. We shot at Purgatory in Brooklyn, which was a wonderful place to film because it was already purple and pink, and so that worked perfectly for the color scheme. My favorite question was whether or not the bartender balloon had a name. I don't think he did, but if you have one, please suggest it. His design was really funny because Atlas and I settled on that pretty immediately, because when we were trying to determine what a bartender looked like, we kind of just both went, he has a little glass and he's polishing it and he's got a little mustache, and it just worked perfectly, and I think he looks like a bartender. How are the dance moves choreographed? Some of them are my personal moves that I bring out in the club, so definitely take a look at that and you'll know how I party. I definitely wanted them to be like kind of cringy dance moves because I think it's just a really funny scene on a surface level of having there be a person completely just dancing with all of these balloons. It was fun creating the different animations for that scene because we had to turn the balloons into people essentially. And so Atlas kind of took the reins on that, creating the different kinds of people that you would find in a club and really having fun with like the different party people. We have a drunk balloon in the background. We've got balloons making out. We have balloons dancing. It's just reminiscent of a club. After the club, we go into the forest scene. There are lots of questions on what the forest scene represents. The forest scene is really interesting because it's the only scene that has two color balloons in one trial. And that's solely because the orange scene is representing chronic illness, and I wanted to pick the two colors on the chronic awareness ribbons that I wanted to discuss. I couldn't use yellow because the colors I wanted to use were yellow and pink, and Bal is already yellow, and that's kind of how I chose orange instead, but I wanted it to be the two colors of the chronic illness I wanted to represent, and that's why one of the balloons is coming in and out. It's representing an invisible illness, and the orange balloon is representing the chronic illness aspect. And so those two balloons are kind of in tangent, because my experience with a chronic illness is having an invisible illness that you can't see immediately, and so I wanted to have the element of the balloon always being there with her and not going away, but also the pains and the invisible illness coming in and out, and that's what the pink balloon represents. Fun fact about the forest scene is that we were not supposed to shoot it where we shot it. We had an entirely different forest picked out, choreographed, designed around a completely different trail that we were going to shoot on, and it ended up raining the day we were going to shoot, and we had a very specific time crunch of when we were filming on location in Connecticut. So what ended up working out was we were able to shoot the forest scene in my backyard, and Alicia and I went outside for 5 minutes and choreographed and walked that entire scene just in my backyard while everyone else waited for the rain to pass, and we were able to come up with a complete backup plan so that we could shoot a scene, run inside, shoot a scene, run inside, and save the camera from the rain. And I think we actually did a great job faking it to look like the trail that we were gonna shoot on. I completely skipped the green field scene at the beginning because it's more more important at the end. So we're gonna jump into the green field scene. This scene has one of the coolest scenes in the movie, which was the waltz, where we were able to choreograph a dance number between a person and a balloon. It's one of my favorite behind the scenes videos that we have because we had to swap the balloon mid-dance, and I ended up rolling in cow shit in order to get that shot. And so I really hope it's worth it. And then from the green scene, we go back to our abyss and our cliff, which we already kind of talked about. And so I don't want to talk too much about the ending because I don't want to give any spoilers away, but I am really excited to share this and see what you guys think and answer more questions if you have them. But thank you for listening to my spiel and asking all the questions that you did. I'm excited to share this and move on to the next one. Bye!